Welcome back to the deep dive. We've got a topic today that came from you, our listeners, and it's really quite something. Blockbusting.
Yeah, it's a term that sounds, well, maybe straightforward on the surface.
Yeah.
But when you dig in, especially with this account from the Saturday Evening Post back in '62,
Yeah.
the layers just keep unfolding. It's deeply unsettling.
Okay, so let's break it down. Blockbusting, fundamentally a real estate tactic, right?
Right?
But more than just buying and selling. The source material, like that Post article, paints it as deliberately using racial fear, convincing white homeowners to sell cheap when black families started moving in.
Exactly. It wasn't subtle. The article literally quotes a Blockbuster saying the goal was, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, but basically to frighten whites out by playing on their fear of losing home value.
Wow. So actively stoking that fear.
Actively stoking it, yeah. And it plugged right into this existing societal bias, this idea that black presence somehow inherently lowered value. That racist idea was the groundwork, really.
And the money side was very deliberate. That article lays out a pretty cold three-step plan these guys use.
It's actually kind of shocking how openly the person writing in the Post describes it. Step 1, whip up fear among white owners, make them panic sell low.
Okay.
Step 2, turn around and sell those same houses to black families, families who were eager for a home but often shut out of other areas, and sell to them at inflated prices.
So buying low, selling high, the classic model, but with this added layer of exploitation.
And then step 3, the financing. Offering loans, often the only option available to these buyers, but at really high interest rates, squeezing profit from every angle.
It's just predatory on both sides, isn't it? Exploiting the white seller's fear and the black buyer's need.
Precisely. And it didn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Saturday Evening Post article. It hints at something bigger, this idea of how a neighborhood's value could just plummet.
Right, which connects to this other systemic piece, redlining.
Yes, exactly. They weren't separate things. They worked together.
Yeah.
The Federal Housing Authority, the FHA, and banks had this system, grading neighborhoods, A, B, C, D.
A being the best, D the worst.
And D neighborhoods were often literally outlined in red on maps. That's where redlining comes from. And the devastating part, just one or a few black families moving in could be enough to flip a neighborhood's grade to get it redlined.
Just like that, based purely on race.
Pretty much. And once a neighborhood was redlined, well, the consequences were huge. Banks would just stop lending there. No mortgages for new buyers, no home improvement loans for existing owners.
So if you were a white homeowner wanting to sell, good luck finding a buyer who could get a loan.
Right. Or if you wanted to fix up your place, keep its value up. Forget it, the banks wouldn't lend you the money.
So the very fear the Blockbusters created, the fear of falling property values, actually started to happen.
Yes. But it wasn't because of the black families moving in. It was because the financial institutions were actively pulling the plug on the neighborhood. It was disinvestment, driven by racist policy.
It's a manufactured crisis, essentially.
Completely.
Yeah.
And the Saturday Evening Post article described what that looked like on the ground. It wasn't just numbers on a ledger.
Right, did it mention?
Things like seeing more black students in local schools, which should be normal integration, right? But it was framed as a negative sign. Churches, businesses, they stopped investing, stopped making improvements. Parks started being used more by black residents, which again fueled this narrative of change, meaning decline.
And then the killer blow homeowners getting denied loans just because they lived too close to the quote-unquote color line.
Yeah. It paints this picture of a community just being starved of resources.
And Linda Gartz, who commented on this article for her book, she had a personal story about this, didn't she?
She did. She talked about how changing school boundaries in '62 directly impacted her own family's neighborhood in Chicago, exactly like the article predicted. It became real, tangible decline for them.
That personal angle really hits home. It wasn't just abstract policy.
No, it was people's lives, their homes, their communities being torn apart. And it created this awful double bind we talked about.
Right. White owners felt pushed to sell low fear, plus no access to loans to stay and improve.
While black families, finally getting a chance at home ownership, were often paying way over the odds.
And getting stuck with those high-interest loans.
Yeah. So who really won? Only the Blockbusters, seems like.
You mentioned black families facing inflated prices and predatory loans. Were there other specific hurdles for them beyond just the cost in these blockbusted areas?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, remember the context of segregation. Often these blockbusted neighborhoods were some of the only places black families could buy, even if they could afford elsewhere.
So limited options force them into these situations.
It definitely contributed. That lack of choice, concentrated demand in these specific areas, which just helped keep those inflated prices high. They were squeezed coming and going, denied access elsewhere, then overcharged where they were allowed.
And the speed of the change.
Right.
That Post article and Gartz's experience points to really rapid shifts.
Incredibly fast. Gartz mentions her Chicago neighborhood went from mostly white to mostly black in just a few years by 65,
Yeah.
and then almost entirely African American, like 98% by 1970.
Wow. Less than a decade for a near total demographic turnover.
It shows how powerful these tactics were, especially when combined with redlining. It wasn't organic neighborhood change. It was forced, driven by fear, greed, and discriminatory systems working together.
So the blockbusting kicks it off, creates the panic, and then redlining comes in and basically seals the deal, ensuring the neighborhood declines by cutting off investment.
Precisely. Redlining wasn't just about stopping black families getting mortgages everywhere. It was about starving entire communities, black residents,
Sure.
and any white residents who stayed of the resources they needed. Infrastructure crumbled, schools lost funding, local economies suffered.
And that legacy, it's still with us, isn't it? Gartz points out Chicago is still one of the most segregated cities.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
These weren't just isolated real estate deals gone bad. This was systemic. It fundamentally reshaped American cities, and the effects, the segregation, the wealth gap, the unequal access to resources, are things we're still dealing with today. Understanding blockbusting is key to understanding those roots.
So boiling it down, the main point seems unavoidable. Blockbusting wasn't just business. It was a deliberate, predatory strategy.
Absolutely. Predatory is the right word. It weaponized racial prejudice, it leveraged discriminatory banking rules, all to make a profit, and the cost was borne by entire communities, both white and black.
You really have to think about the human impact. The white families feeling forced out, losing their homes, maybe their savings.
And the black family striving for that dream of owning a home only to be exploited with high prices and bad loans, often ending up in neighborhoods that were being systematically denied resources.
It really casts a long shadow. Linda Gartz finishes with some powerful questions for us to think about, doesn't she?
Yeah, essentially. Now that you see how blockbusting worked, how it connected to redlining, does that change how you view neighborhood change and race?
And what does this history mean for today? For housing, for segregation now?
They're crucial questions. It's a tough part of our history to look at, but seeing how prejudice and systems were manipulated for profit, it's vital for understanding where we are now and hopefully how we can move towards something more equitable.